is this true? The answer is no. But I have to tell you why. Okay, I'll start with this. If genes control our lives, and the genes are essentially almost all of them in the nucleus of the cell, that leads us to believe that the nucleus is the cell's brain. So it basically says right there, nucleus, a cell's brain. And that's because if the genes control life and the genes are in the nucleus, then the control of the cell is in that nucleus at that time. So when we give the concept that the nucleus is the brain of the cell and give the credit to the genes, then we bought into a belief system. And then I go, well, how true is that belief system? So then I go and say, look, here's the work that I was doing about 30 or 40 years ago, and it was based on the nucleus and controlling the functions of the cell, the nucleus being the cell's brain. I come with a simple logical statement. It goes like this. You remove the brain from an organism, and the immediate consequence of doing that is that at some point the organism dies. You take a brain out of an organism, throw it away, and the organism dies. Of course, unless it's a politician, then they just... So basically, an organism dies, and I go, wait, what if I go into a cell and remove the nucleus from the cell? And I say, yeah, well, what's that process? Well, it's called enucleation. I did that in my research. Take the nucleus out, take the genes out, and throw it away. Well, the nucleus is the brain of the cell. So if you take the brain out, the cell should die, except the cells hold me another story. The significance was this. The cells live, the behavior remains unchanged, and many cells can live for 2 or more months with no genes in it. They're not sitting there. Every day they're up and about, eating, breathing, moving around, communicating with other cells, avoiding toxins, and essentially their life is unchanged without the genes. Well then, what is this whole story that genes control this? The fact is, there's a whole lot of control with no genes in there. And so the first significance that comes out of this understanding is that the nucleus is not equal to the cell's brain. The cell is still coordinating its behavior and creating complex maneuvers in its world with no genes in it. So something else. Well, I got my insight into this 43 years ago. I was culturing stem cells. Now, a lot of people think stem cells are relatively new in our world. I was cloning them 43 years ago. At that time, of course, there weren't that many stem cell biologists in the whole world, but we were working with some very interesting cells. Let me show you an experiment that you don't even have to be a rocket scientist to understand, and it changes everything. So here's my experiment from 43 years ago. I start with a stem cell culture dish. I put 1 stem cell in the dish. That stem cell divides about every 10 hours. So after about 2 weeks, I end up with thousands of cells in the petri dish. But here's what's totally unique. All the cells are genetically identical. Why? They came from the same parent. So they all have the same genes. So we start with that. Then I say, I go to this dish, and I take some of the cells out and put them into another petri dish, and I change the environment. And the environment for the cells is what we call the culture medium. So I put some of the cells into a dish with environment A, and the cells form muscle. I say, cool, that's a wonderful experiment. I say, okay, I go back to the very same dish, take some more of the cells out, put it in dish B, with yet a different culture environment, and guess what? The cells form bone. Go back to the original dish, take some cells out. Somebody's in my throat. Take some cells out, put it into a third petri dish, C, and when I do that, the cells form fat. Okay, now here's the rocket scientist question I'm going to ask you. What controls the fate of the cells? The environment, yeah, because they're all genetically the same. Well, wait a minute. I'm teaching in a medical school, genes control everything. And now if I had genes, didn't control that at all. The cell was controlled by the environment. And if I take my dish of cells, my plastic dish of cells, and put it into a bad environment, guess what happens to the cells? They get sick. They end up dying. The culture begins to crash, and then you would say, oh, Bruce, your cultures are so sick. What drugs should you give those cells? And I go, you give them no drugs. You take the dish from the bad environment, move it back into the good environment, and the moment you do that, the cells recover their health completely. And this becomes totally relevant for our understanding for a simple reason is this. Well, I'm talking about all this stuff going on in the culture dish and moving the plastic dish from here to there, etc. Let me give you a little bit of information about yourself. Number one, you look in the mirror and see yourself as a single entity, and I go, first, misperception. You are not a single entity. You are comprised of about 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. You, when I say me, I am talking for a community of cells. So a body is a community, not a singular element. That you are a community of cells. More than that, you are a skin-covered petri dish. Inside your body, you've got 50 trillion cells. You've got a culture medium. It's called the blood. And I said, yeah, but when I change the composition of the culture medium, I change the fate of the cells. I go, yeah, that's true. I said, what about the composition of your blood? I go, that's connected to the brain. The brain is the chemist. The brain releases chemistry into the blood. I said, yeah, but what chemicals does it release? And I go, whatever the mind perceives. When you perceive love in your life, you release chemicals like oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin into the blood. These elements in the blood enhance the growth of the cells, maintenance of the body, and provide a lot of body-creating energy. So when you're in love, guess what? You are totally, wonderfully healthy, happy, and fully energized. Why? Because your culture medium is really supporting the growth of the system that way. And I said, okay, but if you open your eyes and you see something scary, oh my God, George Bush, and then what happens is I start to release stress hormones in my body. So I start to release adrenal hormones and I release inflammatory agents, and guess what? I change the chemistry of my blood. I change the chemistry of my body. My body absolutely in a state of protection, which that would be, shuts down the growth. It even shuts down the immune system. So when you're afraid, you actually shut off your growth and you shut down your immune system. So when you live in fear, guess what? You get sicker faster. And then you look at this country and you wonder why, my God, we're one of the sickest countries in the entire world. And the answer is, for all the years, in the last 10 or so years, think of all the fear that everybody lives under. And that fear is promoting all the illness and sickness. Matter of fact, medical doctors use stress hormones therapeutically. They give it to patients that receive foreign organs. Why? Because when you put the stress hormones in their body, it shuts off or inhibits their immune system so you don't reject the foreign organ. I say, well, that's cool for the person that needs a heart, but what about you and me sitting in this room? If you're stressed, you are shutting down your system. You are opening yourself up for illness. And unfortunately, there's one last, there's three parts of the stress response. Number one, you shut down the growth because you're allocating the energy of the body for fight or flight. So you're not going to use it for growing, you need it for running. You shut down the immune system because the immune system requires so much energy when it's operating that you conserve energy if you're running. I give the story. I said, you're the controller of energy in your body. You got a little room up here in the brain. You got a desk with a telephone on it. The phone rings. You get a phone call from the stomach saying, oh my God, we have a bacterial infection down here, and I think we can anticipate a very bad case of diarrhea. And you're going to be the energy guy. How much energy should I send down to that stomach? And just before you commit some energy, you get another phone call, and someone says, oh my God, we're being chased by a lion. And I say, well, okay, how much energy should I put into my fight or flight system to run away from the lion, and how much should I put into the bacteria? I hope you understand the answer. The answer is the hell with the bacteria, because if the lion catches you, the bacteria become a lion's problem. So the reality is you shut down this immune system. So, okay, we got two bad things. You shut down growth, you shut down the immune system. Let me tell you the third problem, stress, because we're living under it. And here's the third problem. When you're in a stressful situation, do you think you use conscious reasoning and logic, or do you use hindbrain reflexes? So guess what? The stress hormones squeeze the blood vessels shut in the forebrain, pushing the blood to the hindbrain so you become reactive, reflexive. What does that mean? When you're under fear and under stress, you are less intelligent. And you can see how that played out politically. Okay, I'm getting way off on that. 10 minutes, I got 10 minutes, so all I can tell you about is this. The cells receive the signals come to the cell membrane sends the signals into the cell, the signals activate the behavior of the cell, respiration, digestion, excretion, same functions that you have. If the proteins you need to carry out the behavior are there, the signal actually goes into the nucleus, the signal controls the genetics. So the environmental signals select the genes that are needed to respond to the environmental signals. And then once the genes are selected, you make the proteins that create the behavior. So the brain of the cell is not the nucleus. The brain of the cell is the membrane, the skin. And if you understand your own embryology, I'll just short circuit this. I'm not going to ask you the question. I'm just going to tell you right out, right now, that your brain is derived from your skin during embryology. So you and the cell are parallel agents to each other. I say, well, what are the switches in the membrane that control them? I say, well, there are switches that are combined two proteins, receptors and effectors. Receptors receive information, effectors send information in the body. So the receptor is scanning the environment to see what's going on. When it gets a signal, it connects to the effector, which sends a signal into the cell to control the behavior and the function. So I say, well, these are the switches that control biology. I said, what are their names? And I give you the scientific name, and it will bore the hell out of you and have no meaning, but I will give you a name based on the definition of what I call the switch. The function of the receptor is awareness of the environment. Your eyes, ears, nose. Again, your receptors, like the cells, are in your skin. You're reading the environment. And this is the function of the receptor. I say, what's the function of the effector? Well, that sends a physical sensation from the cell down into the cytoplasm to control the functions and the genes.